Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us.
Okay,
This is
well,
this is a this can be an emotional topic. I feel like for some people,
yeah.
and I feel like it is. Well, you read the title, forgiveness. I feel like it almost is the opposite of what we're culturally conditioned to appreciate. If you think about our superheroes and all these people, so often it's about revenge. Stories are about vengeance, revenge,
Or just justice.
justice. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This idea that we must be punished for our
Mm,
wrongdoings. And
yeah.
this, I think we haven't spoken about this part of it, but maybe we can remember this might bring in that book on communication that we read, where the guy would go to prisons and
I was
yeah,
thinking about that. It's the one with the green leaves all over it.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so interesting. Well, see, I struggle with forgiveness because I think forgiveness, it's a lot like some of the other topics and conceptions in our culture. It's kind of portrayed as one way, but really, I think forgiveness actually means something else. And so it takes me a while to realize that when I'm talking about forgiveness, I don't necessarily mean,
mm,
yeah, it's validation is a similar thing. I feel as though a lot of times forgiveness and or validation are portrayed as you're just okay with whatever, you
mm-hmm,
know, I forgive you, it's all good now.
yeah,
And I don't necessarily think that that's what forgiveness means to me. And it would be interesting to talk about what, in the terms of Divine Mother, what when we're called to forgive, what are we actually being called to do?
yeah. And I think that's when we envision Divine Mother just loving us unconditionally, you're kind of forgiven for everything. And for her, unconditional. It's not conditioned upon believing in her a certain way or anything else. It's just this unconditional love. That almost doesn't register,
Mm,
right? I mean, whether it's our children doing something wrong or it's a criminal doing something wrong, we take it to other nations doing something wrong. Usually not the nation in the sense of the people, but usually the leaders of those nations. The nation, the person, the child must be punished.
mm,
And I'm right with you. Then when we hit the idea of forgiveness, we think, okay, well, then I'm just telling my child they can do whatever they want. They
right.
can run all over me. And you're talking about something much more nuanced, much more
Yeah,
subtle
yeah. As
and
usual,
deep.
it's a word that has so many meanings to it, and I think it's important that we talk about energy because, in a way, when I'm talking about and thinking about forgiveness, I am thinking about freeing up my energy for myself to do other things with in my life, to have time to give more to Divine Mother. And when I forgive, I free up that energy. And I also think it's very important that someone told me this once, forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that you then carte blanche say everything a person did to you or to someone else is completely okay. It's not that you have to connect with someone who has hurt you. It's not that you have to go suddenly, march in parades and support whatever. It just means you free your energy from, because let's talk about that energy. So much of this world is the energy, mental energy we spend, and that mental energy turns into physical and vice versa. So wouldn't you agree that when we're upset, when someone has wronged us, when we think something is unjust, that we spend a ton of energy? And I think if we don't
Yeah.
take a course of action, then our energy, in a way, doesn't serve us or anyone else. So if we feel strongly about something, then action is good. And if sometimes we can't do anything about it, then forgiveness is a good action because it does free up that energy consumption.
It's an important thing to realize that often the people that we are that we're feeling unforgiving about that we're angry with or frustrated with or we want vengeance upon, often these are situations where we can't really shift or change. We don't know that person anymore. We don't have any ability to interact with them or power over them. And if I can use a heavy example, we used it in not Become a Dungeon Master, in Diary of a Forest Monk, our book. A forest monk of ours who was sexually assaulted, a terrible experience, and she realized over time how much she was replaying the situation in her head, how much energy she was spending on still kind of re-experiencing this mentally.
Yeah.
And so the forgiveness, in a way, sometimes is not even so much about the other person, but can free you from carrying something that you've been carrying, reliving, thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of energy that takes is tremendous. If we would take 50% of that energy and turn it towards love, connection with somebody close to us or something, wow, what that could do, let alone if we took 100% of that energy and turned it to something else. We're not hurting that person or getting our vengeance by thinking bad things about them or wishing ill will on them. We're only hurting ourselves and creating stress hormones and allowing, in that case, that person to keep damaging her.
Right. It's a perpetuation.
Over the years.
Not that, obviously in extreme situations, you need to be able to, see somebody, to talk about things, to have grief, to have anger, to have all of the appropriate emotions. There's so many, emotions that, they're all appropriate. It's just at some point when we have something that we've been carrying, in the end, it's a freedom when we can let it go, for ourselves. And, to speak of lesser degrees, with a partner, with a sibling, with a coworker, forgiveness is a way to clear the air and to say, hey, I want to try again. And that brings me to that book you were talking about with the inmates, because a lot of times, this is a completely different, its own thing. A lot of times our culture, the way it's set up, it doesn't teach people as we're growing up the skills to deal with some very, very, very difficult topics and very difficult life situations. And so those people don't have those skills. They make a bad choice, and our system shuffles them into this whole way of, they can't get out of it, and no one is actually teaching them those skills anymore. They're just making a bad choice after bad choice, butting heads against this system where there, in a way, is no forgiveness. And the second chances that we give aren't, they're a setup. Because if you don't have the skills and you're not taught the skills, how can you ever help yourself learn what you don't know? And so I think you should talk a little bit about the forgiveness in that book, if you remember it. Do you remember it?
Not a whole lot. I know that was very important to him, and recognizing that.
Maybe we can see what the title is and include it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mindfulness sort of. Yeah, but the idea was, and it's similar to this other book that I love, which is called Changeable, is that when we actually forgive ourselves and we allow the idea that we can be forgiven for something that we have done, then we can change, we can choose something new and something different. But if we can't ever access that forgiveness, or we don't ever feel forgiven, then it's almost, they say if you don't believe something is possible, you won't ever be able to experience that in your life, because you'll never actually process it, because it isn't possible. And so it's about possibilities. That, talking about that book, is more about forgiving ourselves and allowing ourselves to be a beautiful part of Divine Mother's creation, regardless of what we have done, and to know that who we have been doesn't have to dictate who we choose to be going forward.
Yeah. There's some obviously some people that are just pathological, and this won't apply to, but think for yourself.
Oh no, if you're pathological.
Think for yourself, when you are forgiven, you know, and we all do these stupid things. We all do things we regret. The other day, one of our daughters did something, and I did not immediately forgive her. I look back and I go, I easily could have given her the gift of forgiveness. It really was not a big
And
deal.
yourself, because you really struggled and suffered in that case too.
Yeah, that you get into self-blame. You get into. We all do this. We make these mistakes, and we fumble.
They're really learning experiences.
Yeah, and when someone just looks at you and just forgives you, you feel this connection with them. You feel this lightness. You learn to start to forgive yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a goodness all around in these cases when it's as it is with almost all of us. People we're doing our best. We're really trying to be our best selves. And it brings that message that, look, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can try really hard, and I just totally respect that. Sometimes you're going to fall, and that's all right. That's part of being human. I still love you.
Well, we were talking earlier this morning about perception and about how sometimes we just clamp down on what we think something is, and we were talking about it with the sunset, I think, or the sunrise.
Yeah.
And saying we only have one view of what that is. It's like this, and you brought up whatever, a group of people, tribe of people, whatever, that believed that the sun went into the earth every evening, and it nourished the earth, and then it rose from the earth every morning. And we can laugh at that, but when we get locked into our viewpoints of things, of ourselves, of who another person is, then we do this funny thing where, for example, if I do something wrong, I know my story. I know all the different things that have triggered me in the past scenarios where maybe something's happened that's similar, and now I'm having a habituated response, or maybe, things that have happened in my day, and I know all those things. So when I do something, I have all of that knowledge there. But for some odd reason, we never apply the opposite, the same thing to the other person. We're like, oh, what are you doing? Like they were trying to, I'm sure there are cases where people are deliberately trying to be angry, and we can talk about that at a separate time. But most people are not trying to be mean, bad people. There is a whole story. There is a whole history there. But for whatever reason, we only apply that to ourselves and not to someone else. And so I think it's very important that we allow ourselves to have to let our perception be broader than just a sunset is only this, or this person is only this, and realize, hey, if I'm judging that person, do I know them? Do I know what led them to that? And in fact, a lot of times, I wish our culture would condition us such that when someone we love, especially someone we know, someone tried and true, does something hurtful or is in a way that clashes with us, that would be an immediate flag. Something's going on with them, because they're not normally like that. But for me, it's usually like, what is going on with them? And that should be my flag. Wait, this person is usually extremely, loving and kind and thoughtful. Something must be causing this, this discord. And so wouldn't it be wonderful if we could see that and reach out, versus just kind of that almost protective, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, you're calling us to ask, what is the rest of the story?
Yeah.
It's another beautiful thing about forgiveness, is that when we lock down into an idea of vengeance or judgment, we no longer are open to seeing the situation. When we are open to forgiveness, or are forgiving, in either case, we remain curious, because we're exploring. We're saying, I don't understand fully what happened here, why this happened. When someone you love snaps at you and says something, there's a story there. They didn't get enough sleep last night, or they had some nightmares, and they're afraid to share something with you. Something is happening there. And when we get curious about the rest of the story, we approach them so much differently than we do when we're ready to blame.
I'm going to use kind of a more extreme example. I'm reminded, this was years ago, I think you had people write in and share stories of forgiveness or whatever. And
oh wow!
It was
I know
that.
what you're thinking of.
Yeah, you should share it. No, I can do it.
You might remember better. Yeah.
So there was a young girl who, I think she was on vacation in, a beautiful tropical, maybe third world country. I don't know exactly where. I don't remember
where. I think this was somewhere in northern Africa where she was, and I can't.
Or maybe she was on a mission trip.
I think it was a mission trip.
So a young girl, and she was, of course, assaulted and murdered by two young men. And her parents, I mean, obviously, I can't even think about it, but her parents, after a while, said, "Well, how could this have happened? What caused this?" And they went there, and they visited, and they saw that the young men there, they saw the conditions that they were living in, and especially how hard it was for the young men because they were essentially expected to just live in gangs, and they didn't have some of the options and so they began with a fund in their daughter's name to try to provide schooling and to try to provide job opportunities and to provide support, and it completely changed the entire community around. And we can argue the goods and the bads of all of that, but to me, that's an extreme level of opening your perception and asking what's the bigger story, and saying, how can I free my energy to do something that makes a difference, especially if it does involve something that was really devastating.
Yeah. I remember Thich Nhat Hanh talking about that on public radio, about the pirates in the Philippines, and everybody just attacking and blaming them. And he came out and started expressing compassion towards these pirates who do terrible, terrible things.
Yeah.
And he said, if you went there, you would see that they're coming out of a system where there's not options. Everything in their young lives is pushing them into this thing that seems like the only option. And so how many of us are like that? I mean, the last time we did something awful, is it because you're an awful person or I'm an awful person? Or is it because our life situation kind of conspired to create a situation where we weren't our best emotional selves? No, whether we look at this on the small scale of, me not being the nicest person to one of my daughters, or we look at this on that grander scale of the pirates or that situation you spoke about, there's the same forces operating. And we counter those forces with that forgiveness. And I realize that it's hard to hear a lot of times, because especially those extreme examples, we feel like, no, we've just got to attack these people. And oddly, that doesn't seem to really.
Well, that's been the method for how many hundreds, if not thousands of years. And again, I just don't know. Maybe it's helped out. It's hard to know.
And again, there's extreme examples when someone is.
It's a spectrum.
Not trying to be the best
self.
It's
a spectrum for sure. And yes, of course, there are deviations and aberrations and situations where, but in a way, I think the important thing is that it's each situation kind of unto itself. And so again, coming back to, here's my situation, with my coworker, here's what happened. And maybe have some observations, maybe I don't know everything that happened. Maybe they just walked out of the boss's office and were told, you've got 2 weeks, and they haven't told anybody yet. And that's, we can't know. And furthermore, even if it was somebody just being spiteful, to carry that energy forward and relive it and perpetuate it is not something that, we need to do. And again, I guess I think it's important that we allow ourselves the feelings we need to have, but then we also need to flow past that. So if there needs to be anger or venting or sadness and grief, whatever, we should allow ourselves that. But I think in the end, the forgiveness is is an opening and expanding back out into the world. And I think I love the thought that Divine Mother, in a way, finds no fault with me. And that isn't to say I can do whatever I want and, and it's all okay. I don't want to, be a bad, I don't want to do things that make me feel bad. I think it was Abe Lincoln, and someone asked him, what's your religion? And he said, when I do good, I feel good. When I do bad, I feel bad. And that's my religion. And so I think that's what forgiveness is calling us to, is to come back to feeling good, feeling like we are centered in ourselves and Divine Mother, and that perhaps we can't know all the elements. We can just give that over to the divine and continue to do our humble best.
So especially when you're applying this to the people we love in our lives, our friends or coworkers, if we think like this and we just think, what would it feel like? What does it feel like? When I conceive of Divine Mother loving me just as I am, forgiving me all the time, not holding things against me, we can ask ourselves, does that make us feel like, oh, good, now I can get away with all kinds of things? No, it actually inspires us to be even better people. When people believe in you and they love you, you want to be a better person in that situation. And so that's the same thing with our children, with our spouses, with the, again, leaving out those exceptions when someone is really not mentally there. Almost always, people are doing their best with their current tools, their current ways of being able to operate. And we've all been given a different set of tools. Not everybody is like all of us here who have been given all kinds of tools and been subject to all kinds of different wisdoms. We can sit and rest in this place where we know we in general are going to, I keep using that best selves for lack of a better word, but we're going to be our best selves. And there's times we're going to fall on our butt and not. But recognizing that a lot of the people around you, some people that you work with, they may not have ever heard of many of these tools or had access to them. It may be a complete unknown. And so not expecting that same level that you might expect out of yourself of the people around you, but realizing you can inspire through your own forgiveness and through your own actions. Because the way you are, it spreads out. And forgiveness is about the biggest kindness you can give to somebody. Because all of us, pretty much, when we do something wrong, we engage in a lot of self-blame.
I was going to say that forgiveness is doing the unexpected. Forgiveness is not an expected thing. It's unexpected. And it is very important that we be able to take that same wisdom to ourselves, because not forgiving yourself for something is also holding back that openness, that ability to move forward. And so you can remember the same things. You were not, even if something is something you did 5 minutes ago, you were not the same person then as you are. You didn't know everything you know now. We can't know what we don't know. I mean, 10 years ago, I was not who I am now. I didn't know the things I know. And so to carry all of the self, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but forgiving myself for things or for, actions, and understanding, hey, I'm a human being. There was a story behind that. It's a really important thing to practice, because then you do free yourself to be that example to other people and to give the gift in a way, especially when it's people that you're close to. Forgiveness is a gift. You give not just yourself, but other people too. So yeah, self and others. It's kind of a multi-pronged approach.
You can try this exercise right now if you want, or later on if this isn't the right time. But this is a way that you can experience some forgiveness for yourself. And you can think of something that you've done recently that you're not proud of. you wish you could take back. We wish we could take back something. It means that we're holding on to that and we haven't forgiven ourselves for it. And you close your eyes and just picture Divine Mother in whatever guise that you want to picture her right there in front of you. And just feel her bend and give you a kiss on your forehead and tell you, you are totally forgiven. You are completely loved, however you are. I love you completely, just as you are. You can make no mistakes with me. And feel for a moment what that feels like to just be loved like that. And allow her to just wash away that thing that you did. You may, after that, feel like, wow, I want to go, and you might, on another level, need to kind of release it and say, Marianne, I'm so sorry. I treated you like that, and that was not the way a friend treats a friend. And you can do whatever else you need to do on another level to let go of that. You might feel more inspired because you're not holding it clenched inside you, but just feeling Divine Mother love you the way you are, totally forgive you, can be pretty liberating.
Mm-hmm. Well, as always, share with us your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stories where you've maybe been forgiven in your life and what it felt like. Those stories, I think, are always pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, we all have some. Again, forgiveness is kind of rare in today's world, but we can all work together to make it more common.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
So much love to you all, friends.